In today's video, we're going to test the performance in this old GTX 570. Sorry for laughing, guys. I remember this card ran rather hot. Used to run it in SLI, so it's a pretty shitty cooler. This one is from Zotac. They call this card Amp Edition. Not sure what that means, but regardless, is this card still relevant? Yeah, we're gonna find out in this video. We're gonna test it in a bunch of popular games. And yeah, with that said, I'm ready to do this. Let's get started. It's actually okay. Hey, how is it going, guys? Robin here on Chips Entertainment, bringing you the best tips and tools for gaming on this channel. You'll find PC components, tech gadgets and console accessories, as well as product reviews and unboxings. So if you're interested in that, consider subscribing and don't forget to tap the notification bell. Now, a question I've been wanting to ask you guys for some time. What is the best budget graphics card right now at this moment? In your opinion, let me know in the comments below. Now, the 500 series from nvidia released back in November 2010, right about 8 years ago, and it was a refresh on the Fermi, the 400 series architecture. It supports DX all the way up to 11, OpenGL 4.6 and OpenCL 1.1. So unfortunately, no DirectX 12 or Vulkan support for this generation, and nvidia was asking $349 back in the days. Now, thankfully, this card is supported on Windows 10, so I figured, wouldn't it be fun to see how it performs 8 years later, right? It's been laying in my drawer for way too long now. I think it's time for it to sweat for a bit, so I went over to nvidia's site to figure out what drivers we needed. Now, after been doing the manual driver search, I got recommended to download what nvidia state is the most recent driver for the 500 series, which is the 391.35, a driver that is half a year old. Well, I guess we have to download it, right? Now, scrolling down on what specific products that are supported by this driver, it turns out that the 400 series is supported here as well. That makes me think that this is the latest driver for the oldest graphics cards that nvidia still fully supports. Now, to make things more fun here, I decided to run the same games as I did on the Ryzen 2400G, a video that I did the other day. I linked that video up down below for you guys to give you guys more context and hopefully even answer the question whether the GTX 570 has been aged with pride or not, so to speak. Now, a few things here before we get into the results. Keep in mind that I'm testing this card on a Ryzen 2400G, which is a budget CPU to begin with. If we, for example, would have used the Intel Core i7 8700K, for example, we would have seen slightly higher numbers here. But yeah, anyway, first and foremost, let me present to you Bethany. Well, that's what I used to call her. This card is from Zotac, and this is their amp cooler. So we're looking at a whopping single 80mm-ish fan spinning and blowing humid air to this spectacular heatsink made of what I believe is aluminum, but please correct me if I'm wrong. We got a total of 1280 megabytes of GDDR5 memory on this baby, believe it or not. So it should be plenty for Minesweeper at least, but is it gonna be enough for modern games? Soon we will have an answer. Now, on one side of the card there is a sticker with the barcode and what looks to be a product number. I went ahead and googled it and found out some more interesting stuff about this card. Juicy information. Now that we have familiarized ourselves with this card, let's let it sweat for a bit. Yeah, so we got 7 games in total: Far Cry 5, CSGO, World of Warcraft, Fortnite, Overwatch, GTA 5, and finally we got Doom as well. And with that said, let's jump into the first game, which is gonna be, yeah, that's right, Far Cry 5. So, the problem with running new games on older hardware can be many. Lack of video memory has always been a struggle on older nvidia GPUs, for example. And so for this game like Warcraft 5, where you need at least 2 GB of VRAM to meet the minimum requirement, we had issues right off the bat. Thank you very much. But the game actually managed to start, and upon starting up the game for the first time, for some reason, game suggested me to go with high preset. Totally worth testing, right? And it turns out the game averages 18 frames per second and tops out at 25 FPS. Not what I would like to call silky smooth, so we got a lot of work to try and possibly fix this. Well, it turns out you need to drag everything down to the lowest. You even have to adjust the resolution scaling to 0.5, and you need a plenty of luck as well. And with that said, we got a few frames over the 60 FPS mark here, but it's a terrible experience and it's a terrible looking game at this point. So the conclusion is, don't even bother with this one, guys. And with that said, let's move on. Next up we got CSGO, and thankfully this game runs like a dream. It feels like the source engine was more or less developed on this generation, to be frank, with an average of 3-digit marks. We got extreme lows of 135 and tops at 200 frames. It would actually be possible to run this game, and you would actually be able to lock the frames with an 144 Hz monitor. Very nice. Time to move on to WoW, and as for the last time, I'm gonna run with preset 5 here. Preset number 5 puts everything to medium basically, so if you're questing, doing arena or similar, having viewing distance set to 5 could potentially work, but otherwise I would actually recommend to drag this all the way up to the highest, otherwise you're gonna be missing out on the experience. In my opinion, it is definitely worth playing around with, as this has a pretty high penalty on the frame rate. Now that being said, the GTX 570 handles WoW pretty good, but I was surprised how badly optimized WoW seems. After all, neither the GPU or the CPU were ever fully utilized according to the task manager, and I wasn't seeing very high numbers. Nonetheless, in busy areas such as Orgrimmar, Dalaran and Zuldastar, staying around the 50 mark seems manageable, and out in the open world, when you're questing and lurking, seeing numbers at the 80 mark shouldn't surprise you at all, which is very nice. And with that said, time to thank the bus driver, and I went with the same settings as for the RX Vega to make things more interesting. So the preset I've been using is low, and then I set textures to high. After that I also decided to push scaling all the way up to 1920 by 1080, and by doing so I got rid of the blurriness and ended up with a much crispier and better looking game in general, with minimal performance impact, as you can see. However, in Fortnite you need viewing distance, otherwise you're gonna be leaving opportunity on the table, so therefore you're gonna want to drag this all the way up to ultra or epic, as Epic likes to call it. Otherwise there's just no point even playing the game, right? So with everything set to low except for textures and viewing distance, you end up with a great looking game. Now as for the RX Vega 11, we were unable to reach the satisfying 60 FPS number, but with the GTX 570 this is not an issue any longer. Very nice. As for Overwatch, same thing here, decided to run the game with the same presets as for the RX Vega, which is high, and the game runs incredibly well to my surprise as well. Even during the most intense moments, game often stayed above the 100 mark. Again, you can see the exact settings I was using as I'm scrolling through them. Worth noting is that the game is not being scaled 100% natively, meaning that there is some scaling which helps the frame rate a bit here. Truth be told, I couldn't see so much of a difference here, and the game generally looks crisp and beautiful. In this game, for example, we pretty much double the performance with the GTX 570. Also, I decided to jam through the benchmark tool in GTA 5 as well, if there is any one of you guys still playing it, since it's a sandbox game and a lot of open wide areas, and it actually has a great built-in benchmark tool. It's it's a great test to just run and see where the system like this lands. Many people have also played the game at least once, so you can relate more visually what to expect, if that makes any sense. Now, I decided to leave settings to low here with a few exceptions. As always, I'm scrolling through the exact settings I was using, but worth noting here is that I'm sticking to DX10, even though this card supports DX11. Now, in contrast with the RX Vega 11, the good old GTX 570 is still showing some strength here, though keep in mind GTA 5 is based on Rockstar's advanced game engine, or Rage for short, and this engine has actually been around since 2006. The first game ever released was Table Tennis for Xbox 360, hands up if you remember that game, but obviously the game engine has improved a lot since. But you have to remember that this game is in fact based on the Xbox 360 and the PS3 with an average frame rate of 110 FPS. It crushes the RX Vega 11 iGPU at the very same graphic settings. And lastly but definitely not least, we got Doom as well. Now the GTX 570 has no support for Vulkan unfortunately, and OpenGL 4.5 runs pretty choppy on the GTX 570. Now some less busy areas were totally fine, and I was seeing frame rates of 60 FPS in many places, but as soon as the environment started to open up a bit, it became so laggy. It was unplayable at medium preset with 70% scaling. But I was looking at the benchmark tool and the task manager. It was clear that the GPU was bottlenecking here. And so to conclude this and wrap this all up, would I recommend the GTX 570? Yeah, well, if you can find it super cheap, definitely go for it. Though you have to keep in mind it's an old graphics card, and as we've been seeing here in this video, you should expect pretty good results if you're interested to play not the very most recent games, or at least not the most demanding game, so to speak. You're gonna be fine with the GTX 570. If you can pick it up for a good price, definitely go for it. Now, if you guys would like to see more similar benchmark videos in the future, please let me know, as I'm finding these videos super interesting and I would love to make more. If you would happen to agree with me, of course, I want to know what is the best budget graphics card right now at this moment in your opinion. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, have an awesome day, right? Bye!